Welcome to the first episode of Brick by Brick in 2025. I'm Roxann Klepper, and I am thrilled to kick off this year with you. Today, we're taking a heartfelt stroll down memory lane to unpack the highlights, surprises, and lessons of 2024, the year that kept us all on our real estate toes. But we're not stopping there. Stick around as I dust off my crystal ball and dive into some bold predictions for 2025, from market trends to tips and tricks. Let's jump in. Let's talk recap first, and because Red Deer is our biggest hub, I'll use those numbers as our baseline. So, sales volume. In 2024, there were a few less sales than in 2023 by about 22 properties. So 1,822 residential properties were sold. In comparison, in 2019, only 1,294 were sold. So while the number is going down from last year, it's gone up significantly in the last 5 years. So you have two scenarios when sales drop. One is high supply, low demand. This is when prices drop. This is your buyer's market. Then you have low supply and high demand, which is where we are now. Sales go down because there's no inventory, whereas the first scenario, sales go down because of low demand. So this is where you'll hear people say, well, sales are dropping. So it's only a matter of time before the market crashes and then I'll get a really good deal. Well, here's the only way the market crashes right now in Alberta, is if a couple 100,000 people move out of the province in the next 6 months, leaving empty houses everywhere. The real estate market is very cyclical, but a shift must happen to change the supply and demand. Alberta's economy is strong and is set to outpace the rest of Canada. So unless supply goes way up or demand goes way down, no market crash will happen for the foreseeable future. Average sales price. We saw a 10% increase or more in most of our markets. Now, some of the bigger cities like Calgary and Edmonton saw 20% or more, as they're still seeing the larger numbers of interprovincial migration. So average sales price is just that. It's an average, so it can change a little bit from month to month. But for most of our markets, that average right now sits around $380,000. where it was only $320,000 a few years ago. So a significant increase. Now, where we're seeing the most activity on our price ranges is in between $300,000 and $400,000. Even with lowering interest rates, as you increase the price range, the stats change. So for example, right now, between $700,000 and $800,000, there are 12 properties for sale and only one sold in the last 30 days. So while the market overall is in a seller's market, this one is very much in a buyer's market, and it gets worse as the price increases. Now, you switch those price points to $300,000 to $400,000, and it's a drastic shift. There are 26 for sale, and 19 have sold in the last 30 days. So very much still in a seller's market with less than 2 months of inventory. So this is the data that shows there are markets within markets. Not every price point is in that seller's market. So leads us into active listings. That number drives everything. Right now, we have 147 residential properties for sale in Red Deer. I remember about a year ago talking about how low it was, and that's when we were just under 300. So you can't buy what's not for sale. So our sales volume decreased slightly, but this number decreased hugely. All of this data makes up the market. Supply and demand drive every number that we have, every statistic that we track. Let's talk about 2025. What does it look like? Well, it's going to look very similar to what 2024 looked like. These will be the variable changes. We are going through a building boom. More permits were pulled now than in 2007 in the last quarter. So we are going to see a lot of new houses getting built in the next couple of years. Interest rates. They are calling for a drop every 6 weeks until the summer, and I believe it. We're going to get back to that 3%-ish range. So those of you holding your breath, you can let it out now. It will get there, and we might even see more activity in those higher price points because of the rate drops. So even though inventory is going to go up with the new builds, with rates going down, there are going to be more buyers getting into the market and more people making a move. So I don't anticipate this shifting us in a big way for a couple years at least. Builders will be building single-family homes, but there will also be a push for multi-family homes. So townhouses and duplexes will be a big chunk of the obtainable housing that goes up. The resale market for those is also going to be very busy because, again, obtainable. So what does this all mean for you? Well, for the sellers, depending on the price point you're in, like we talked about, it could mean quick sales and multiple offers. For the buyers, it's still going to mean being prepared. Have your pre-approval letter ready to go, and don't expect to find any good deals in the lower price points, or any of the price points for that matter. The biggest hurdle for sellers is to be able to sell and find somewhere they really like to buy without being homeless. So it's a strategic timing game. 2025 will be the same low inventory, high demand market we've been in. But what will be interesting to see is how the variables change. How many houses get built? Where do the rates end up? And what happens to immigration and interprovincial migration? So it's going to be an interesting year. Stay tuned. I do a weekly video on different stats for the different towns every week on my social media. You can follow along. And stay tuned for next week's podcast. We have an amazing mortgage broker here talking about interest rates, mortgage predictions, and the economy. So really looking forward to chatting with Arlene. Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you next time.